Now there's many of us that have vowed we're doing everything we can to defund the Department of Justice, to defund the FBI, and to fight the weaponized government. But I want to explain also the serious situation that we are all in.
This is actually the position of the modern day MAGA Republican Party. Here we are in 2024, and what they're talking about is defund the DOJ, defund the FBI, rely on spies and agents from Russia to launder disinformation on 1023 forms to bring down United States presidents. And then when they're caught, they're out there saying, yeah, it is what it is. Someone special who I want to talk to about this today. I want to talk to somebody who worked at the United States Attorney's Office in the Southern District of California for 9 years. Somebody who led the chief of the violent and organized crime section for the Department of Justice, the United States Attorney's Office in Los Angeles, who's actually also running as a candidate for district attorney here in Los Angeles, a Democrat. Let me bring in Jeff Chemerinsky. Mr. Chemerinsky, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Ben. It's great to be here with you. And thank you for the great work you all do.
I appreciate it. Look, when you watch that, when you've spent your life before running for district attorney and you see the Republican Party's position of defund, dismantle the DOJ and the FBI. I just let me give a brief bio so people know who Chemerinsky is. You've never lost a case. You personally prosecuted cases involving murder, sex trafficking, firearms, trafficking, corruption, and sex assault offenses. You've won convictions of more than 30 members of the MS-13 gang, including the leader of the MS-13 in Los Angeles and the leader of the East Coast Crips. You also led a federal robbery prosecution for the office, partnering with local law enforcement. So when they're just saying this about the DOJ and this about the FBI, I had to get you on here. I just wanted to get your reaction as a prosecutor, as a Democrat running for office. What do you make of all of this?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. It's outrageous. And the Democrats really need to stand up. I think it's really a place where Democrats can take the high ground on public safety issues. That I worked with the FBI, I worked with federal law enforcement and local law enforcement every single day as a federal prosecutor. Really proud of the partnerships I had with them. And we built some incredible cases against some really horrible people. As you said, worked and convicted the head of the MS-13 gang here in Los Angeles, the overall shot caller of all of MS-13. And that case really shows the great work that the FBI does and the great work the FBI does when it partners with local law enforcement. That case was the result of a multi-year FBI investigation working with the LAPD, the ATF, the DEA in partnership to really target and dismantle the leadership of MS-13 here in Los Angeles. They recruited a high-level informant who had just gotten out of jail to a member of the gang, member associated with the Mexican mafia. They recruited him to work with the FBI as an informant, and based on that access was able to really go after the leadership of the MS-13 gang here in Los Angeles, dismantle the leadership, hold them accountable, and really have an impact on public safety. But cases like that shows the impact that the FBI has. And I can really speak to this from a violent crime perspective, because what I did every day as a prosecutor is go after violent criminals and worked really closely with FBI. And I can tell you, FBI has a really important role in going after violent criminals. But that MS-13 case is just one example of many cases I did over the years of working on violent crime with the FBI and other federal law enforcement. We, as you said, convicted the head of the East Coast Crips. And that was a case where that individual had terrorized the streets of South LA for more than 30 years. He had accumulated more than a dozen felony convictions. And we convicted him of RICO and murder, including for a cold case murder that had gone unsolved for more than 7 years, and was really proud of the work. That was an FBI LAPD partnership, and I was really proud of that case. But those are just two examples of hundreds of cases I prosecuted working with the FBI and other federal and local law enforcement agencies. And when Republicans like Green go after the FBI and other federal law enforcement officials, I really take it personally because those agencies do great work. And I really saw that as a federal prosecutor.
Well, they also want to defund you. I mean, they're saying they want to defund the work that you're doing at the Department of Justice. They want to defund the work that FBI agents are doing in coordination with your office to try to keep crime off the street. And they do it in this cavalier, just mocky way. They give the middle finger to law and order, and they give the thumbs up to lawlessness. Take a look. This is what Matt Gaetz said. I could show you, Chemerinsky, I could go on for days showing you videos just like this. I'm not going to do that, but this is what the Republican Party is, and it's shocking to me. This is what they are in 2024. Here, play this clip.
Differently, to me, chaos is no budget. Chaos is an unaccountable administrative state. Chaos is a weaponized federal agency, everything from the DOJ to the FBI to the ATF, and I would defund every last damn one of them if we don't get them back on the side of our people. Chaos is voting on funding the whole government all at once.
When Republicans like Matt Gaetz say chaos is what's going on in the Department of Justice, chaos is what's going on in the FBI, just one more time, walk our viewers through a day in the life of Jeff Chemerinsky before you were running for District Attorney of Los Angeles, when you led the chief of violent and organized crimes. Talk about, as Matt Gaetz says, the chaos. Go through your day in the life of what you would do on a typical day.
Yeah, so as you said, before I left to run for DA, I was chief of the violent and organized crime section of the United States Attorney's Office here in Los Angeles. I oversaw all violent crime prosecutions for the United States government, not just for LA County, but for LA County and 6 surrounding counties for a population of 19 million people total. And to do that job successfully, I had to work with all the law enforcement partners, especially throughout the federal government, but also with the local government partners to really keep our community safe. And what we really were able to do is target the worst of the worst. That includes murderers, sex traffickers, gang leaders, international kidnappers, people who would exploit children. And then I did dozens of armed robbery cases and led the federal robbery program. So the day-to-day life in that role as chief of the violent and organized crime section is both you would proactively meet with law enforcement to really target the worst and most dangerous people in the community. And you'd also, there'd be a reactive component, reacting to things on the ground as violent crime was committed and making sure that we responded appropriately. It's an incredibly important role, working with law enforcement every day to keep our community safe. And I worked closely with the law enforcement leadership throughout the county and the broader area to do exactly that. Worked closely with the FBI and their leadership throughout this area. FBI has a number of gang squads, violent crime squads who do great work every single day, and was really proud to work with them. So when individuals like Matt Gaetz and others go after the FBI and talk about defunding them, or the ATF and talk about defunding them, it's just outrageous. And those law enforcement agencies do such good work and important work. I saw it in the violent crime side every single day.
And you never lost a case under your leadership. I wanted to make sure I made that very clear as well. And in winning these cases, you knew how to deal with informants. And one of the bigger cases that you handled in taking down the leader of MS-13, you talked about how you had to deal with an informant and a network of informants potentially in order to source and gather information in cases like this. Compare the work that you did, though, to the MAGA Republicans, because we're hearing a lot about all of these informants that have been relied on by people like James Comer and Jim Jordan. And it now turns out that there are people like Alexander Smirnov, who turned out to be a self-professed, he said it, agent of Russia. He said, Smirnov said, laundering disinformation in order to take down a United States president. And then when they're confronted with that fact, you got MAGA Republicans like James Comer and Jim Jordan. Their response is what it is. It doesn't affect anything at all. Let me just share with you prior public statements made by James Comer about this informant who he called very credible. And again, there are dozens of interviews like this. I'll just pick one. Play it.
Claims. What is the whistleblower saying specifically?
Well, as you know, Maria, Senator Grassley and I have reviewed a legally protected and highly credible whistleblower document, which alleges that there was an exchange of money for policy decisions made by then Vice President Joe Biden. We have determined that whistleblower is extremely credible. And based on the bank records that I've been getting, and you and I have been talking about on your show for weeks now, and based on the fact that 9 different Biden family members have been receiving payments from a web of LLCs that are receiving payments from our adversaries around the world, this fits a pattern of questionable behavior that the Biden family members have been doing to receive funds. So we take this whistleblower claim very seriously. We know it exists. We know the FBI has the document. As Senator Grassley said, it is not classified. So we want that document in our possession. And we also want to know what the FBI did to verify the claim of the whistleblower.
Mr. Chemerinsky, explain the magnitude of how fatal it would be to an investigation where an informant or a source is so improperly mishandled, where misrepresentations are made at a public scale like that. And from a strictly legal perspective, look, I know James Comer's a political guy and he cloaks himself in the speech or debate clause. But in the world of lawyering at high level, high profile prosecutions, explain the magnitude of the mishandling or the intentional fabrication that we're now seeing.
Yeah, I think it's really important the public understand this. So as a federal prosecutor, as part of your basic training, you're taught about the importance of informants, and you're taught about the importance of really vetting every informant that you work with, that it's sort of drilled into you from the very start that you have to really vet your sources and vet your informants. Your credibility is on the line when you put up witnesses and when you trust witnesses, whether it's to get charges or at trial. And you need to be able to really stand by those informants. And so I'll tell you how we did it at the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is we really vetted anyone we were willing to work with, and really vetted their information and who they are and what their sources were and how well we could trust them. And we wouldn't rely on someone we couldn't 100% trust, because ultimately, as a prosecutor, it's your credibility on the line with whoever you put up as a witness. And so your sources, your informants need to be verifiable. They need to be credible. They need to be trustworthy. And I think it's really troubling that these Republicans are willing to stand by such shady sources and rely on them without vetting them, without thinking them through. And we would never do something like that at the U.S. Attorney's Office. It's just not the way we operate. So, yeah, we would vet any source, any informant incredibly carefully. It's what you had to do. And big cases would go down when they didn't do that properly.
Yeah, I want to talk about this LA district attorney race. You're a candidate, and there's a lot of Republicans who are running as Democrats now. You've been a Democrat your entire life, which I think is an important thing there. But one of the people you're running against is George Gasone, who's the current district attorney, who kind of fashions himself as being a progressive, being somebody on the left, if you will. But, you know, one of the things that really infuriated me about Gasone, among other things, one of the things was this $5 million settlement that he had to pay in a civil rights case that was brought against the city of LA for basically buying into this right-wing MAGA propaganda. This is from the LA Times right here. And this hasn't gotten that much attention, but I'm like, why? And it just goes to show you there's this pattern of MAGA Republicans like working the refs. Like if they just keep on doing it and the pressure campaign, we see here even that someone like Gasone, who considered himself someone on the left, if you will, buys into the MAGA Republican garbage and goes out and actually prosecutes. So if I may, let me just read just briefly about this case so people know it, and then I want to get your reaction because it was mind-boggling to me.
Yeah,
so
great.
the LA County District Attorney's Office is going to pay $5 million to settle a civil rights lawsuit brought by the head of a tiny Michigan software company that became the focus of a bungled 2022 prosecution based largely on the word of conspiracy theorists. Sound familiar, everybody out there? Yeah, the MAGA Republicans were doing this everywhere with Smartmatic, with Dominion, and here as well. Eugene Yu, chief executive of Conic, sued Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gasone last September, alleging civil rights violations and negligence stemming from an October 2022 indictment on charges that Yu was illegally storing LA County poll workers' personal information overseas. The case against Yu drew praise from Trump and others who questioned the results of the 2020 election. I would have rewrote this article to say who tried to spread lies about the 2020 election, but so be it. For months prior to the charges, Yu faced allegations he was working for the Chinese government to manipulate U.S. ballot boxes, and it goes on to say that this criminal prosecution was false. A civil rights lawsuit was then filed, and the county had to pay out a settlement of $5 million as a result of this conduct. I mean, this is absurd, right? This is absurd. And I get it. There are other criticisms of Gasone in terms of crime and all these things, and I'll leave that for another day. For the purposes of MeidasTouch, this one just stood out at me like, what?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ben. It was absurd and it's outrageous and it hasn't gotten enough attention. What you're talking about is a case George Gasone filed based on right-wing conspiracy theories about election manipulation. He held a press conference to announce the charges. Donald Trump trumpeted the charges. It was also, I should note, a case that was presented to a number of state AG's offices. It was presented to the FBI, and the different state AG's offices that saw the case and the FBI all rejected it. And then George Gasone's office filed it, held a press conference about it, and then 6 weeks later had to dismiss the case. The result was a $5 million civil rights settlement that now is going to be paid out of taxpayer money based on this right-wing election manipulation theory case that George Gasone's office filed. In my mind, it's just one of a number of failures in leadership that we've seen from this current district attorney. And people should be really outraged about it because it's going to be millions of dollars now paid out of taxpayer money based on this, which really was a right-wing election manipulation theory. And it's just outrageous.
So the way I understand, this race for the county district attorney is that, there's a runoff that's coming up soon. And then there's a whole lot of people who are running. I mean, I think you're the most experienced, and having never lost a case in that role as a federal prosecutor is really impressive, to me. And being the Democrat in the race, I think is a Democrat's Democrat, not a Republican turned Democrat to run, which I think is a major issue here. We've got a lot of people from LA who watch this. We got a lot of people who know people in LA that watch this. So what can you tell us just about like the dates, early voting, what's happening with this race, and where can people find out more info about you?
Yeah, great. So the primary is March 5th. Ballots have already been sent out. It's an incredibly important election. Our district attorney, George Gasone, has become incredibly polarizing. He's a very isolated figure and leader in the county. And I think the reality is he has a very hard road to re-election. And so there are a number of conservative challengers who are running against him. And I'm the leading Democrat. I'm running in part to keep this a Democrat seat. I also believe I'm the best person for this role for all the reasons we've talked about. But George Gasone has become incredibly polarizing, and he's really done it to himself with lawsuits like the one we just talked about that led to the $5 million settlement. There's been a number of lawsuits, I think over 15 now, lawsuits against him based on his employment practices, his retaliation against his employees. Another example is that the state of California, the governor, Gavin Newsom, made available millions of dollars to go after organized retail theft, smash and grab robberies, and 12 other DA's offices in the state applied, but George Gasone didn't apply and didn't get a cent, leaving millions of dollars on the table to go after smash and grabs. And these are just a few of the huge failures in leadership that we've seen over the last few years. So I'm the leading Democrat in the race. I've collected terrific endorsements from Democratic clubs. I'm the only challenger to have Democratic club endorsement and support. I've been endorsed by dozens of current and former elected officials, and it's a really important race. You can read more about my campaign at my website, jefforda.com. But it's important that people vote and they get out the word, because it really is important who's our next district attorney.
Jeff Chemerinsky running for district attorney for the county of Los Angeles. Thank you so much for joining us here on the MeidasTouch show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you, Ben.
All right, everybody, hit subscribe. Let's get to 3 million subscribers together. You see some pretty surgical insight right there from someone at the DOJ who could give you even better perspective than perhaps even I can or Popak can, or when it comes to federal issues. You know, Karen Friedman-Agnifilo was a district attorney number 2 at the Manhattan DA's office. So I wanted to make sure I got you that federal perspective as well. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 3 million together and have a great one.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.